Hello and welcome to another episode, No Ceilings Podcast with your host here, Rob Reynosa. Ego death. I was asked about the ego death, how to begin this process by a reader, by a fan, by an audience member on my page. And I was referring to I wrote a post about how there's two things that, if you want to end suffering, if you really want to tap into power that's beyond our comprehension, we have to be willing to let go of needing to know how things are going to unfold, what the next step is, or how things are going to look down the line. We have to be willing to let go of all that need to know. And we also have to let go of having to control everything, having our little sticky fingers on everything and trying to control everything and make things go our way. And when we realize that desire, that overpowering desire to need to know everything, I need to figure it all out before I get started. And I need to control and have everything go perfectly my way for me to have confidence in myself to complete the project or to keep going. Like, that's what causes all our suffering. That's what creates a bunch of disconnection from who we really are, and then the process and the results. Because it's impossible to control everything. It's impossible to know everything. That's not part of the plan. That's not part of the game. And that's really ultimately our ego. It's our ego trying to figure everything out, trying to control everything. And when we surrender our ego, when we surrender that part of ourselves, and it's not something that we can do, or it's not something that we do 100% of the time, because the game is duality, right? The game of life that we're playing is duality. Duality, it's up, down, as above, so below, as within, so without, right? Like, whatever, if the pendulum swings left, it has to go right. What rises must fall, right? That's all part of duality. Good versus bad, good and bad, right? All that stuff, that's all duality. So the same thing applies to your higher self and ego. Like, that's considered duality. You have the ego that's always trying to control stuff and takes things personally and creating stories and analyzes everything. That's the ego, right? And then you can also call that the masculine part of yourself. Then you have the other part of yourself that exists as well simultaneously, which is the feminine part, which is more of your higher self, your spirit, right? Connecting to source energy, flow, being in that flow state. So when you're able to surrender your ego, like I said, it's not 100%. You're not 100% in one, and 100% in the other. It's a dance going back and forth. But when you're able to surrender one, you're able to connect with the other. And sometimes you do also need to come out of spirit, come out of higher self, because sometimes it's necessary to get to work. It's necessary to grind. It's necessary to use your willpower to spark the engine, right? To start the train, to get hyped up, to do what you got to do. So I'm just breaking this down here about the ego, understanding that we need both. We are both. Like, it's not that one is bad and one is good, one is evil, one is destructive, and one is harmonious and perfect. Like, they're both part of the same system. It's the light and the dark. Like, you need both. You are both. We are both. All of us have the masculine and feminine within us. All of us have the dark and the light. And so it's not about the question the woman asked. She says, "How do I, start this process? How do I start this death of the ego?" Let me see if I can pull it up real fast, because it was actually the way I read it was a little bit different. Let me pull it up real quick here. Hold on. It's on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram. Okay, ego death, great concept. What are your thoughts on how to achieve this? That's what it was. So ego death, great concept. What are your thoughts on how to achieve this? So when I saw how to achieve this, right? How to achieve ego death, the first thing I thought about when I read that question was, well, it's not really about achieving ego death, because when I think about achieving, I think about completion. I think about, you got to the end result, and that's it. Like, you achieved it now. And when I think of achievement in the process of development, spiritual development, personal development, right? I never see the end. I never see it as the end. It's always, the process is always a means to an end, but it's never the end. And this isn't about this woman here. This is just about language that I see and hear from people when they describe their achievement of spirituality or achievement of enlightenment. And to me, it's like you never really achieve enlightenment. You never really achieve the ultimate level of spirituality. It's an ongoing process. It's a lifelong process. And so this question here, again, ego death, great concept. What are your thoughts on how to achieve this? To address that straight on, my belief is that we are layered. We're multi-dimensional, multi-layered beings, right? What we see right now on the surface, let's say you've been doing some work on yourself and you've been shedding off certain layers. What you see right now on the surface is not the end result. This isn't the final product. And I think that's so freaking awesome when you think about that. Like, right now is never the final product. I wouldn't even give it any sort of percentage or measurement. I don't believe there is one. I think that this is a process, a project, your objective, your duty, which is to continuously shed off layers of yourself until your death, until your physical death. And I believe that when you become, I believe that is part of our soul purpose, is to literally pull away the layers that once worked for us. It might be our, certain attitudes, certain perceptions, certain beliefs, certain perspectives, certain things that we've done to cope, even the destructive stuff that we've used to cope, or that we use to cope, to protect ourselves and to love ourselves in our own ways. That stuff is all meant to, it all serves a purpose, but it's all meant to be shed. It's all meant to be released and to be surrendered, so we can continue to tap into the greater part of ourselves. And so my answer to this question is how do you embark on this process? Like that's the question that I'm addressing, is how do you embark on this process? How do you begin this process? So first of all, understanding like, what is the ego? What is the ego? In my own words right now, I can say that the ego it's a construct. It's an accumulation of your past experiences, your programming, the things that you've seen, felt, touched, you've been hurt by, things that you've loved, things that you've fallen in love with, things that you've been taught by your family and friends. Everything that, just if you take your accumulation of all of your experiences, it creates a template. It creates a template, and it makes up your personality, your personal story, personality, right? And which then is a part of your character. And so the ego, in my opinion, is the accumulation of all of your experiences, your character, and your personality that we utilize to push forward in life and to also protect us in life. The ego, to me, isn't anything that you want to kill. It's not something that you want to die. It's something that we want to understand and develop and transcend. Transcend not meaning to escape or to rise above, but transcend the layers off of us, almost like as if like if you're dressed in the cold and you have multiple layers on and you want to become cooler, you would take off your sweatshirt or take off one of the layers. And it's like when you take off a layer, if you've ever been in the cold and you have multiple layers on, and let's say you walk into the cabin, you walk into the heated room, and you're like, oh my God, I'm hot. And you take off a layer and you're like, oh, that feels good. Let me take off another layer. Oh, that feels good. Like you're not killing or destroying yourself. You're just releasing what was there to protect you, what was there to keep you safe, to keep you warm. And you're just releasing it. You're letting it go so you can have some sort of relief. And you can tap in closer to your desired state. And that's kind of what I think about the ego. And so when I said ego death, and this is kind of where it might sound contradicting now, because when I said ego death, there are parts of us that we've been utilizing to, like I said before, like to cope, right? There's been parts of us that, for example, we've gone through experiences when we were kids, and let's say our parents making promises to us to take us somewhere or do something with us when we were younger, and then them not following through on their promise. And so then we get hurt and we don't trust people now because we've been told so many times and been let down. So we've been told promises so many times and have been let down so many times, where we now kind of have our guard up. And so when someone promises something, we're like, yeah, right. Like, let's see. I don't believe this person. Let's see. Right. And so having that guard up where, let's say someone does promise you something or someone does commit to you, but you don't take them at their word because you've been let down so many times where you just don't believe people. You don't trust people. That would be a part of your ego. That would be a part of your identity that you've created to protect yourself. And it doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you wrong. It's just a part of your identity. In order for you to get closer to people and to develop healthier relationships with people, you're going to have to let some of that go. You're going to have to surrender and really trust yourself and trust the other person. But most importantly, it's not even really trusting the other person. It's trusting yourself that, if I do get disappointed, it's okay. It's all good. It doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It doesn't mean that I'm not lovable. It doesn't mean that I'm not worthy. It's just this is what it is. And I don't have to make it mean all these negative things. And so our ego likes to go into those spaces where it's like, well, what if? I don't want to get hurt. I'm not going to let my guard down, right? And so when you do that, you keep people at bay. You don't let people in. It's like you have kind of like a cold heart, right? I'm describing this so accurately because this is me. Like, this is stuff that I've dealt with and things that I'm still working through till this day. This is why I'm like describing it so intricately. But anyways, to the death of that layer of ego is to allow that part of yourself to literally die off. It's like, when you reach a point where you've suffered so much because you can't trust another human being, or you feel like you can't trust another human being, and you have no friends, and you don't allow people to get close to you, and all you desire is to have an intimate relationship or be closer to people or develop better friendships, you're going to have to allow that part of you to die. And you're not killing the ego. You're not destroying it. You're acknowledging the fact that this doesn't work anymore. This is keeping my heart closed. I need to let this go. I need to surrender. And it's also, it's very, and letting that go, it feels like you're letting a part of yourself go, that a piece of your armor that has kept you safe for so long. You feel so vulnerable letting it go. And you're just like, dude, I feel like I'm fucking exposing myself. No, I feel like I'm just putting myself out in the wind and in the cold, and like, I can get hurt. And that is the beautiful part about surrendering your ego, where you stick your neck out, you put yourself out there, you're taking that risk because you're in the space of, I trust myself so much that I can work through this if this happens. And this is what I'm committed to, is to working through this process of trusting another person and opening my heart back up, because I am committed to love, or I'm committed to a relationship, or I'm committed to developing myself. So by letting parts of ourselves go that have kept us safe, it feels like an ego death. It feels like death, because we really are letting a part of ourselves go that has kept us safe for so long. And the same thing happens too, this is comparable to like a relationship. If you're in a relationship and things aren't working out, like your partner has developed in a certain way where they're going in a certain direction, you've been developing yourself in a certain way that has you going in a different direction, and our roads were parallel with each other and crisscrossing each other for such a long time, but we've both grown into our own people and developed ourselves into our own people, where we don't share the same connection like we used to. Like, it doesn't look like how it looked in the past anymore going into the future. Right there, when you think about that in a relationship, I'm sure you've experienced this where it's like, dude, I can't even imagine like not being with you anymore. I can't imagine even not, sharing our lives together anymore. Like you're who I know, you're who I spend my time with. This is how we hang out together. We have similar friends. Like that alone, even thinking about that can feel like a death, like a part of you is dying. And that's what it is. It really is. A part of you is dying. A part of you that matched this other person, that served a purpose, that was carrying a certain weight to fulfill this bond, this creation, this relationship that you once shared with somebody else. It's time to go now. It's time to let this person go, because if you continue to hang on to this person who you were before in the past and continue to try to feed this idea of whatever the idea is of like the relationship and the connection, you're now disobeying yourself and you're going against yourself because you're not that person anymore. You've developed yourself so much where you're setting yourself up for a different level of life, of success that demands a different version of you. It doesn't mean it's a better version than the other person. It just means it's a different version, a better version of your old self where it's time for an upgrade, right? And so when you're ready to upgrade your car, you're going to have to let your old car go. When you're ready to upgrade your clothes, you're going to have to let your old clothes go. And sometimes even that hurts. You're like, damn, man, I don't want to let go of these clothes, or I don't want to let go of these shoes, or I don't want to let go of my possessions because I've had this since I was a kid. That's all ego right there. But that is very similar to experiencing an ego death. So I'm going to end this right here and just kind of leave it as so. The ego death is understanding, first of all, it's important to understand, well, what is ego? And also, what is ego? And understanding that there is no end game to this process. There is no achievement. You feel like you've achieved. You really do. You feel like you've achieved certain levels of success and personal development and self-awareness. That's true. You do feel like you have achieved. Like I feel like I have a lot of achievements, and I understand though that those achievements aren't the end result. It's a part of the game. It's a piece of the puzzle that I'm still trying to figure out how to put together and trying to work through. So it's like I don't hang on to the achievement of like, man, I won, I achieved this. Last thing here with that, it's what I've discovered, what I've found is that when you do go into that space of I achieved enlightenment, I achieved this thing I was dealing with, I achieved not being jealous and being reactive anymore, right? And the minute that you think that you achieve that, someone else comes into your life or an experience happens in your life that triggers another layer of that part of you that you thought you worked through. It triggers another area that you didn't see. And it comes up again and you're like, what the fuck? I thought I worked through this. I'm sure that sounds familiar to you because I know it does to me big time. That's part of the game. That's purely part of the game. There is no end game. It's a process. It's all an unfolding process, and it's freaking badass. So anyways, I just want to address that ego death. It's not an achievement. It's a process. And ultimately, what glues everything together is your commitment. Like you have to be more committed to being vulnerable, to expressing humility, to looking at your flaws and looking where you could be better, looking at your mistakes, not running from your mistakes, honoring, acknowledging where you fucked up before in the past and owning it. That's all part of this process. And the more that you're able to do this, the more you're able to be brutally honest with yourself and look at yourself and assess yourself and admit that I was an asshole in this relationship, or I was walking around with a chip on my shoulder. I had a bunch of resentment, which is like why I mistreated my best friend for so long. And my best friend was trying to tell me this whole entire time that I was being this asshole and all I do is complain and all I do is this. And I wasn't able to look at myself and really admit that I was full of anger and hate, and the only way that I could communicate was through passive aggressive expression. And I pushed away my best friend, and my best friend wasn't able to communicate with me because they were angry and they didn't know how to react to me. And so it's like when you get to the process of that, when you work through the process of, let's say, a friendship ending or something, you have to be able to look at yourself and admit this and look at yourself in the mirror and be like, damn, I was being an asshole. I had a part in this too. And in those moments when you do acknowledge that, that's when you suffer an ego death. And as much as it hurts, it's fucking liberating. It is so freeing to know that you are not trapped or boggled down by your past, by your mistakes. You can forgive yourself, you can acknowledge yourself, and you can move. You can continue to move. You can continue to grow. So anyways, that's my take on ego death, and I can go deeper into this, but I'm going to leave this right here. Thank you for tuning in. As you know, conscious creators, we are the future. There is no ceiling.